Long before humanity reached the stars, they were told that freedom would come with limits. The Galactic Council had made that clear from the very first day Earth was invited to join their alliance. The Council represented hundreds of worlds, thousands of species, and countless years of peace. Their rules had kept order in the galaxy for centuries, and one of those rules was simple. No newly admitted species could build warships. When humanity joined, they accepted that law, at least on paper. The Council didn't trust them completely. History showed that humans had always been restless, unpredictable, and driven by emotion. To the older races, humans were too young to handle real power. They had advanced too fast, fought too many wars, and reached space with a reputation for destruction. Even though Earth had united under one flag to gain entry into the Council, the fear lingered. During the first few years of membership, humans tried hard to prove themselves. They followed every rule, paid their dues, and sent delegates to the Grand Chamber. They traded technology, opened ports to alien ships, and built peaceful colonies on nearby worlds. For a while, it looked like things were finally calm, but peace never sits easily with those who still remember war. Some humans, especially the ones who had lived through the Terran conflict before the Council era, found it hard to trust others with their safety. They remembered the days when no one came to help Earth, when human cities burned and the only protection they had was the one they built themselves. Those people believed that depending on the Council for defense was foolish. They didn't see safety in the treaty. They saw chains. The Council's fleets patrolled the main trade lanes, but Earth was still far from the center of galactic politics. If an invasion ever came from beyond the known systems, help would take weeks, maybe months, to arrive. By then it would be too late. But every time someone brought this up in the assembly, the same answer came. The Council protects all members equally. It sounded good on paper. In reality, most humans didn't believe it, so the years went by and tension slowly grew beneath the surface. The public didn't see it, but inside research stations and quiet government offices, small conversations began to happen. It always started the same way, someone asking, "What if we built our own protection, not to start a war, but to make sure no one ever dares to attack us again?" Those words were dangerous. The penalty for violating the Council's restriction was severe. If caught, Earth could lose its membership, or worse, face a blockade. Yet the idea wouldn't die. It spread quietly among scientists, engineers, and old military officers who still carried scars from the past. They didn't want to rebel. They just wanted to survive. Officially, humanity's defense was limited to patrol crafts, small, lightly armed vessels for border security. But everyone knew that wouldn't stop a real threat. When pirate fleets raided outer colonies, they had to send distress calls to alien ships for help. When rogue warlords from unregistered systems crossed the line, Earth had to request Council intervention. Every time they waited, every time, someone asked why humanity had to beg for protection when they had the brains and skill to protect themselves. It wasn't about pride, it was about survival. The Galactic Council didn't see it that way. They saw it as arrogance. Their message was clear. Humanity must not build weapons of war beyond Council regulation. The galaxy remembers the Terran Wars. We will not allow another. Those words were repeated so often that humans could recite them by heart. It was as if the universe had decided that Earth's destiny was to obey, not to lead. At first, people accepted it. They focused on progress, terraforming, trade, research, exploration. But deep down, that old fire never went out. Humans were explorers, builders, and survivors. They had come too far to sit quietly while others dictated their limits, and so, in the quiet corners of human space, something began to stir. No one knew who started it, but whispers spoke of a group that believed the Council's fear was misplaced. They argued that strength didn't always lead to war, that sometimes strength was what kept peace alive. They didn't want to destroy the Council's trust. They wanted to prove that humanity could be responsible with power. The idea was simple: build one ship. Not a fleet, not an army, just one vessel that could defend Earth if the worst ever came. To hide their work, they disguised it as a research program. The shipyard was registered under a civilian construction company specializing in asteroid mining. The Council's sensors saw only what they were meant to see: cargo tugs, survey drones, and ore haulers. No one outside the project knew the truth. Only a handful of people were involved, each sworn to secrecy. They were not heroes or villains, just people who wanted to make sure their home would never be left defenseless again. But secrecy came with a cost. Families were left behind without explanation. Workers vanished from colonies without notice. People whispered that something big was happening, but no one dared to ask what. Those who did often disappeared into the same silence. The leaders of the project didn't crave power or fame. They knew what they were risking. If the council ever found out, Earth could lose everything it had gained. But they also knew that doing nothing meant depending forever on the mercy of others. As years passed, tension between Earth and the council grew. Other species began to view humans as unpredictable again. Every time Earth questioned a law, the council tightened control. Every time humans asked for independence, they were reminded of their dangerous nature. Yet quietly, the project continued. The first prototypes were small, barely larger than freighters, but they tested advanced shielding and propulsion systems far beyond what was publicly allowed. Each success gave the engineers hope. Each failure made them more determined. They didn't want to build a weapon of destruction. They wanted to create a guardian. And as strange as it seemed, many of those who worked on it never saw themselves as rule breakers. To them, they were protecting something sacred, the right of humanity to exist without permission. Meanwhile, on Earth, ordinary people lived their lives unaware of the growing secret. They watched alien ambassadors on the news, saw trade ships crossing the skies, and believed the peace would last forever. Only a few politicians knew the truth, and even fewer understood the risks. The council's inspectors visited regularly, checking shipyards, scanning transport routes, monitoring construction. They found nothing. The humans had learned to hide their tracks well. In the quiet of space, in a place where the council's eyes rarely looked, the foundation of something greater was being built. It wasn't finished and it wasn't ready, but it existed, and that alone was enough to make those involved feel both pride and fear. They called it Project Erebus. To them, it wasn't just a ship, it was a promise. A promise that if danger ever came, humanity would not wait for help that might never arrive. They would stand on their own no matter the cost, but for now the secret stayed buried. The council remained unaware, and Earth continued to play its part in the grand illusion of peace. Still, deep in the hearts of those who knew, one question kept echoing. How long could they keep it hidden? And if the day ever came when the truth was revealed, would the galaxy see humanity as protectors, or as the very threat they had always feared? Because no matter how peaceful the surface appeared, one truth never changed. Humans had never been good at following orders when survival was on the line. They had been warned not to build warships, but warnings, as history had shown, never stopped them before. The secret project that began as a whisper had now taken on a life of its own. What started as a few engineers working in the shadows had grown into something far greater, a movement powered by quiet determination. They called it Project Erebus, but only among themselves. To the outside world, it was known as the Stellar Transport Enhancement Program, a harmless research effort meant to improve space cargo efficiency. Hidden beneath the surface of the asteroid V-29, deep in the cold dark of the outer system, the real work continued. The asteroid was hollowed out, its tunnels lined with metal and machinery. To any passing ship, it looked like a mining site, dusty, abandoned, and unimportant. But behind those thick layers of rock, history was being written in secret. Inside, hundreds of workers moved silently under dim lights. Engineers reviewed schematics, mechanics welded plates, and programmers adjusted flight codes. Every person there carried the same quiet fear. If the Galactic Council ever found this place, it would mean the end of everything. Yet that fear was the very reason they kept going. They had grown tired of being told what they couldn't do. Humanity had spent centuries fighting to survive, and now that they were among the stars, they weren't about to live on someone else's leash. The Council had made their position clear. No warships, no heavy weapons, no military AI. Humans were allowed only light patrol craft, unarmed transports, and planetary defense systems that couldn't leave orbit. But those rules didn't stop the minds who believed survival was worth any risk. Every person working on Erebus had their own reason for being there. Some had lost family in border skirmishes where Council fleets arrived too late. Others were scientists tired of seeing their best work dismissed as too dangerous for humans. A few were soldiers who couldn't accept being told they'd never again serve to protect their own world. They didn't speak much about what they were building. Words could be dangerous. But every time someone watched a piece of the ship take shape, a hull section, a core stabilizer, a reactor coil, they felt something deeper than pride. It was purpose. The early prototypes had been failures. The first engines overheated, the first hulls cracked under stress, and the first AI systems refused to sync. But each failure only taught them more. Slowly, bit by bit, Erebus became more than a dream. They designed the ship not to destroy but to endure. Its outer plating could absorb radiation and kinetic impact. Its engines were designed for both speed and silence, allowing it to move unseen across systems. Its energy system was built from hybrid technology, a mix of human ingenuity and alien principles quietly gathered from years of trade. They weren't stealing. They were learning. Still, secrecy came at a price. Supplies had to be smuggled through trade routes disguised as mining materials. Scientists had to falsify reports and reroute funds through countless layers of bureaucracy. Every shipment risked exposure. One mistake could bring the Council's inspectors straight to their door. So they worked under rules of absolute silence. No personal communications, no data storage that could be traced, and no official records. Only a handful of leaders even knew the full plan. Sometimes, when the crew gathered in the break room to eat their synthetic meals, they would talk softly about Earth. They missed the sound of rain, the smell of trees, the sight of sunlight through clouds. Some hadn't seen their families in years. They told each other that one day when the project was done, humanity would stand free again. That belief kept them going. Back on Earth, the government's higher circles were divided. Some officials knew of the project but pretended not to. Others denied its existence entirely. It was safer that way. The fewer who knew, the smaller the risk. Yet even those who turned a blind eye couldn't ignore what was happening. They received anonymous reports of unusual activity in the outer systems. Council probes had detected irregular power signatures, but so far nothing clear enough to investigate. Still, the tension was growing. Every council inspection brought sleepless nights for those involved. The inspectors were thorough, their sensors advanced, and their patience endless. Whenever a convoy arrived from the outer system, they scanned every container, every manifest, every ship log. But the humans had become clever. They had learned to use the Council's own bureaucracy against them. They buried their true shipments beneath tons of harmless data, layers of numbers, trade routes, and random cargo codes that made perfect sense on paper. To the inspectors, Earth looked loyal and compliant. To those behind the project, it was all an act. One evening, as the crew in the asteroid shipyard watched the stars through a narrow observation window, a quiet realization sank in. They were building something that could change everything. Not just for Earth, but for every species that had ever been silenced or underestimated. They didn't see themselves as rebels. They saw themselves as a message. The Council believed that by denying humanity the right to build, they were keeping the galaxy safe. But to these men and women, safety built on fear was no safety at all. True peace didn't come from weakness, it came from balance. The project's chief engineer often said, "A blade that's never drawn still keeps the peace." That sentence became something of a motto among them. They weren't planning to use Erebus as a weapon. They just wanted to make sure humanity never had to kneel again. As the ship's core structure neared completion, new challenges began to appear. The energy readings were too high, and the containment systems were unstable. The hybrid reactor combined human fusion technology with alien gravitic coils, something never tested before. A single mistake could cause the entire asteroid to collapse. Days turned into weeks as they adjusted every variable, ran every simulation, and prayed every night that it would hold. The fear wasn't just technical, it was moral. Every worker knew they were walking a fine line between protection and rebellion. And beyond the darkness of the asteroid, the Council's presence was growing stronger. Patrol ships were beginning to pass through the region more frequently. A few of them even sent automated scans toward the belt, forcing the workers to shut down all systems and pretend to be an abandoned mining site. During those hours of silence, every heartbeat felt like thunder. No one dared to breathe too loud, but the universe has a way of testing resolve. One day, a transport ship carrying vital reactor components was delayed. It had been stopped by a Council patrol, questioned for hours, and scanned for unauthorized materials. Somehow, the crew managed to talk their way out and continue the journey. When the ship finally arrived, the entire facility erupted in quiet cheers. They had escaped exposure once again, but everyone knew it wouldn't last forever. They had crossed the line between courage and danger long ago. Now they were racing against time. The closer they came to completion, the greater the risk became. Every transmission had to be encrypted, every ship arrival perfectly timed. There were no second chances. Yet despite the constant fear, the morale stayed high. People worked long hours, sometimes through exhaustion, driven not by orders but by belief. They believed that what they were building would protect generations yet unborn. In the silence of the hangar, surrounded by steel and stars, the massive shape of Erebus began to take form. Its sleek frame reflected the light of distant suns, dark and beautiful. It looked nothing like the bulky warships of alien fleets. It was sharper, smarter, almost alive. One of the technicians once whispered, "It looks like something born to watch over us." And in that moment, everyone in the hangar felt it, the sense that they were not just building a ship, they were building hope. Back on Earth, the political tension deepened. Rumors began to spread within the council that humanity was hiding something. But there was no proof, only whispers. Some species demanded an investigation. Others argued that humans should be left alone. They were too small, too distant to be a threat. And so while the galaxy debated, the humans kept building. The hum of engines, the spark of welders, the low echo of machinery, it all continued day after day, in defiance of fear. Project Erebus was no longer just a secret. It was a heartbeat, and deep down, everyone involved knew one thing: sooner or later, someone would find out. But when that day came, they hoped the galaxy would finally understand why they did it. Because humanity wasn't building a weapon of war. They were building the right to stand unafraid in a universe that never stopped watching. The secret couldn't stay buried forever. In space, even silence leaves traces, and secrets as large as Project Erebus have a way of drawing attention. For years, the humans behind it had managed to hide their work with perfect timing, clever disguises, and quiet discipline. But one day, all it took was a small mistake. One routine scan that showed something unusual to change everything. It began with a patrol probe from the Galactic Enforcers. The probe was on a standard route through the outer solar system, sweeping for pirate activity and smuggling trails. Its scanners picked up a strange energy signature coming from the direction of asteroid V29. At first, the reading looked harmless, just like background radiation from mining operations. But a sharp-eyed operator noticed something that didn't fit. The frequency pattern was too consistent, too refined. It wasn't random noise. It was controlled energy. Within hours, the data was sent to the Enforcer Command. They ran the numbers again and again, and each time the conclusion was the same. Someone was running a power source far stronger than what a mining colony needed. The Council's response was immediate. A small fleet was dispatched to investigate. Officially, they were there to assist with routine safety checks. But everyone knew what that really meant. News of the incoming patrol reached the hidden facility before the ships arrived. The message sent panic through the underground hangars. People dropped tools mid-task. Alarms flashed quietly in red, and voices rose in tense whispers. For years, they had prepared for this moment, but no amount of planning could erase the fear that now filled the air. The project leaders gathered in the control room. The monitors showed the fleet's trajectory: 3 cruisers, 2 scouts, and a dozen drones. They would arrive within 20 hours. 20 hours to decide whether to hide, or to reveal everything. Some argued that they should shut everything down. They could power off the reactors, seal the hangars, and pretend to be a mining site again. Others said it was useless. The power readings were already too strong. The Council would know. They would dig. As the argument grew louder, one of the senior engineers stood up. His voice was calm but heavy. "We always knew this day would come," he said. "The question isn't whether they'll find us. The question is, what will we show them when they do?" The room went quiet. Everyone looked at the massive holographic model of the Erebus floating in the center of the room. It wasn't finished yet, only 87% complete. The outer hull was sealed, the engine core operational, but the weapon systems were still uninstalled. It couldn't fight, not yet, but it could fly. They had built the impossible. They couldn't just let it be dismantled. After a long silence, a decision was made. They wouldn't surrender the project. Not this time. While some stayed to prepare the asteroid for inspection, others began working around the clock to move Erebus out of hiding. It was risky. Launching the ship would expose it completely. But if the Council wanted proof of what humanity was capable of, they would show them. As the hours passed, tension turned into quiet focus. Every worker knew this might be their last shift. The hangar buzzed with energy as systems came online one by one. The ship's engines hummed faintly, their glow reflecting on the faces of the people who had built them. It was beautiful and terrifying at once. Outside, the Enforcer fleet entered the outer system. Their transmissions filled the comm channels, demanding access codes and authorization. Earth's government responded carefully, pretending ignorance. "There's nothing out there," they said. "Just mining work. You must have faulty readings." But the Enforcers didn't believe it. They began scanning deeper. On the asteroid, the crew sealed all entrances, turned off the beacons, and prepared for stealth mode. Inside the hangar, the countdown began for launch readiness. It wasn't a military launch, it was an act of truth. When the moment came, everyone stopped to watch. Through the transparent panels in the command deck, they saw the massive vessel rise from its berth. The Erebus moved slowly at first, almost silent, then steadier, stronger. Dust and fragments of rock floated in its wake as it broke free from the asteroid's shadow. For the first time, humanity's forbidden creation stood in the open, and the galaxy noticed. The Enforcer ships detected the energy burst immediately. They changed course, heading straight toward the asteroid. The lead cruiser transmitted a message to Earth's High Council. "You have violated Galactic Law Section 9. Prepare for investigation and possible sanctions." Back on Earth, officials were in chaos. Half of them wanted to deny everything. The other half wanted to open negotiations. The message that came from the Erebus, however, changed everything. It wasn't a military broadcast, it was a calm statement. "This vessel is built to defend our world. We do not seek war, but we will not dismantle our right to survive." Those words echoed through the galactic channels, reaching every listening post, every ship, every world. The message was simple, but its meaning was powerful. For centuries, the Council had maintained order by keeping younger races under control. But now one of those younger races had spoken back. The Enforcer fleet demanded that the ship be powered down and surrendered. The humans refused. A tense standoff began in the void between worlds. Inside the Erebus, the crew worked quickly to stabilize systems. They weren't ready for battle, but they could defend themselves if necessary. The engineers who had spent years in secret were now crew members standing at consoles, their hands shaking but determined. They watched the radar as the Enforcer ship spread out, forming a blockade around them. A voice came through the comms, cold, distant, and official. "Deactivate your ship immediately or face enforcement action." No one answered for a moment. Then the human commander, an older man with a steady tone, spoke. "This ship is not a weapon of aggression. It is a shield. We will not power it down." The silence that followed was heavy. The Enforcers didn't attack right away. They weren't sure what the ship could do. They had seen nothing like it before. Its energy readings were unlike any known design. Caution won over arrogance, at least for the moment. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, news of the incident began to spread. Media networks, traders, and independent colonies all picked up the signal. Some called it a rebellion. Others called it courage. Worlds that had once viewed humans with suspicion began to whisper among themselves. "Maybe they're not dangerous," some said. "Maybe they're just trying to survive." The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Delegates shouted, argued, and pointed fingers. Some demanded immediate military action. Others warned that attacking humans would only prove their point, that the Council feared their independence, and through it all, humanity remained silent. The Erebus stayed in orbit around the asteroid, unmoving, a black shadow against the stars. It didn't fire. It didn't threaten. It simply existed, and that alone was enough to shake the galaxy's balance. Inside the ship, the crew monitored every signal, every transmission. The fear was real, but so was the pride. They had done what everyone said was impossible. They had built something not out of hate, but hope. One of the young technicians looked out at the stars and said softly, "They told us we couldn't be trusted. Maybe now they'll see why we had to do this." The older engineer beside him nodded. "They might never understand," he replied, "but they'll never forget either." For the next several days, the standoff continued. The enforcers sent more ships. Earth sent more messages asking for peace. The Council demanded compliance, but no one moved first. The situation was too fragile. One wrong move could start something that no one wanted. In the end, the Council decided to send envoys to Earth for negotiations. But even before they arrived, the message had already been made clear. Humanity wasn't going to be silenced anymore. The secret was out, and there was no turning back. The Erebus now floated freely in space, its dark hull glimmering faintly in the light of a distant sun. The ship had no insignia, no flag, no claim of dominance. It represented only one thing: the will to protect. And in that moment, even those who feared it the most couldn't deny one truth. Humanity had stepped beyond the boundaries placed upon them. They had defied fear, defied control, and reminded the galaxy of what made them truly different. They were not the most advanced species. They were not the oldest or the strongest, but they had something no council law could regulate: the courage to stand when told to kneel. The Enforcer fleet stayed close, watching, waiting. But the humans didn't flinch. Somewhere deep inside that ship, a small light blinked on the main console, a signal from Earth, carrying a simple message from their people. "We see you. We're with you." For everyone on board, that was all they needed to hear. The galaxy could threaten, argue, or fear them, but humanity had already made its choice. They had been told not to build warships. They had been warned of consequences, but they had done it anyway, because sometimes surviving isn't about following orders. It's about believing that your right to exist is worth protecting. And the world would soon find out just how far humans would go to keep that right. The ship that the galaxy said should never exist now floated freely in the quiet dark of space. The Erebus was alive. Its engines glowed like soft fire beneath the surface. Its hull a seamless mix of human design and alien influence. Every curve, every bolt, every circuit told a story of defiance and hope. It wasn't just a machine. It was proof that humanity could build something powerful without meaning harm. But the galaxy didn't see it that way. To the Galactic Council, Erebus was a threat, an insult to their authority. For generations, their rules had shaped peace across countless worlds. Now one young species had dared to break those rules. To them, it wasn't courage, it was rebellion. Yet for humanity, this ship wasn't about rebellion. It was about never being helpless again. Inside the Erebus, life had become tense but calm. The crew had accepted that every second they spent in orbit might be their last. They worked quietly, keeping systems stable, monitoring communications, waiting for orders that might never come. Outside, the Enforcer fleet still lingered, watching like predators circling a wounded animal. But the Erebus wasn't wounded, it was awakening. Days passed. The Council debated endlessly while Earth pleaded for diplomacy. But behind closed doors, another conversation began, between those who built Erebus and those who had to decide its fate. Some on Earth believed surrender was the only way to save their people. They feared what would happen if the Council decided to use force. Others argued that dismantling the ship would erase the one thing that gave humanity equal footing in the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, Earth's leaders didn't know which path was right. Meanwhile, the crew on Erebus continued their work. The ship still wasn't fully complete. Some systems had never been tested under real conditions. Engineers worked around the clock, tightening connections, checking shields, making sure the ship could withstand anything. They didn't speak of war. They spoke of survival. One technician looked at the glowing panels of the control deck and said softly, "We built this to protect, not destroy. I just hope the galaxy can understand that." No one answered. They all felt the same fear, the fear that the Council would never understand. Then one night, something unexpected happened. A massive energy surge was detected in the nearby region of space. Sensors on both the Erebus and the Enforcer fleet picked it up simultaneously. The readings were strange, wild, chaotic, and unfamiliar. It wasn't human technology, and it wasn't from any known Council ship. The Enforcer commander immediately accused the humans of testing a forbidden weapon. But those aboard Erebus knew the truth. It wasn't them. Within minutes, more signals appeared. Dozens of unidentified ships were entering the system from the edge of known space. Their designs were crude but powerful. The Enforcer fleet moved to intercept, thinking it was another human trick. But the attackers didn't care who they were. They fired on everything, human and alien alike. For the first time, Humanity and the Council faced the same threat. The enforcers tried to respond, but their fleet was caught off guard. One of their cruisers was disabled almost instantly. Communication channels filled with confusion and shouting. The Erebus detected the chaos but stayed silent, watching from a distance. Inside the ship, tension filled the air. The human commander turned to his crew. "They're being attacked," he said. "If we do nothing, they'll be destroyed. But if we act, the Council will see us as aggressors." No one spoke for a long moment. Then one of the younger engineers said quietly, "If we built this ship to protect, then this is what it's for." The decision was made. The Erebus powered up its main drive and changed course toward the battle. The enforcers didn't know what to expect. When their sensors picked up the ship moving, they panicked. Messages flooded the channel demanding that Erebus stand down. But humanity didn't respond. For years, they had been told what they could and couldn't do. This time, they acted on their own. As the ship approached the battlefield, the view through the main display was breathtaking and terrifying. The unknown attackers. The space around the Erebus was chaos. What had started as a few unknown ships had turned into a storm of fire and light stretching across the void. The Enforcer fleet, proud defenders of the Galactic Council, was being torn apart by an enemy no one could identify. For a long time, humanity had been told to stay quiet, to follow rules they hadn't even helped write. But now, as the Enforcer ships burned, the Erebus stood between two choices: stay hidden or act. And in that moment, no one thought of politics, no one thought of orders. They only thought of survival and of doing what was right. Inside the command room, alarms glowed red. The sound of systems booting echoed through the corridors. The Erebus came alive, its engines lit like dawn breaking over dark oceans. The crew didn't know who these new attackers were, but they knew one thing for sure. If those ships reached Earth, billions would die. "Power to shield," said the commander, voice steady but low. "Activate defense grid. Target any ship firing on Enforcer vessels." That single order changed everything. For the first time, humanity's forbidden warship entered battle. The Erebus accelerated faster than any Council ship could. Its hull shimmered, bending light as it moved. The attackers turned toward it, surprised by the sudden arrival of a massive new vessel. They fired. Blue beams streaked across the void, slamming into the Erebus's shields, but the energy rippled and vanished harmlessly. Human technology had evolved differently, born from desperation, not luxury. Every part of Erebus had been designed to endure, to survive, to fight longer than any ship built by a committee of cautious diplomats. The crew worked like one mind. They didn't shout or panic. They just acted. Every hand on the controls knew what to do. The ship's rail batteries spun up with a deep hum, releasing streaks of light that sliced through the black. One of the enemy ships exploded instantly. Another followed seconds later. The Enforcer fleet, watching in disbelief, couldn't understand what they were seeing. The humans had built a ship that could do what entire fleets struggled to achieve. But the Erebus didn't stop there. It moved to cover the crippled Enforcer vessels, taking the brunt of the attack. Its shield glowed brighter, then dimmed, holding strong against wave after wave of energy blasts. The Enforcer commander sent a transmission, his voice shaking. "Human vessel, stand down. You are violating Council engagement codes." But no one on Erebus answered, because at that moment, saving lives mattered more than any rule. The unknown attackers were fast, coordinated, and ruthless. They seemed to come from the edge of the galaxy, where no civilized power dared to go. Their ships had no markings, no identifiers, only sharp black hulls and weapons that pulsed like living fire. Still, the humans fought back. Every time one of those enemy ships targeted an Enforcer, Erebus intercepted. Every time an escape pod launched, the humans positioned themselves to shield it. It wasn't a battle of dominance. It was a fight to protect everyone, even those who had once tried to control them. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense. The walls shook with every impact. Sparks flew from damaged panels, and the deep vibration of the reactor echoed through the decks. Yet there was no fear, only focus. One officer turned from her screen and said, "If we keep this up, they'll turn everything on us." The commander nodded. "Then we give them something to remember." Outside, the Erebus unleashed its full strength. The weapon array pulsed, releasing a massive beam that tore through the largest of the unknown ships. The explosion was silent, but even light seemed to shudder. The remaining attackers scattered, some fled. Some tried to fight, but they couldn't match the humans' precision. For a moment, the void went quiet again. Only the faint hum of systems remained. The Enforcer fleet drifted in stunned silence. Ships that had once pointed their weapons at Earth now floated behind Erebus, damaged but alive, saved by the very people they had been ordered to control. But humanity didn't celebrate. The crew of Erebus knew this wasn't over. The attackers might return, and the Council would now see their ship not as a savior, but as a dangerous symbol. The commander gave the order to stand by and begin rescue operations. Shuttles were deployed to recover survivors from both human and Enforcer ships. No one was left behind. That was the one rule Erebus lived by. When the Enforcer commander finally boarded to meet the human crew, he expected hostility, but instead he found quiet exhaustion. The humans didn't look proud. They looked tired. "You saved our fleet," he said, struggling with the words. "Why?" The commander looked at him for a long time before answering. "Because when lives are at stake, rules don't matter." The Enforcer said nothing more. He simply nodded and left. Back on Earth, the news of the battle spread faster than light. Every transmission, every recording, every witness told the same story. Humanity had fought back, not against the Council, but alongside them. The ship that was never meant to exist had become a legend overnight, but not everyone was pleased. In the Galactic Council chamber, arguments erupted. Some demanded humanity be punished for disobedience. Others said they had proven themselves. A few whispered that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy needed ships like Erebus. For the first time, cracks appeared in the Council's unity. Meanwhile, the humans on Erebus didn't rest. They studied the wreckage of the attackers, trying to learn where they came from. What they found was chilling. These ships were built with designs that didn't match any known species. Some of the technology seemed ancient, almost as if it had been buried and rediscovered. It wasn't a random attack. Someone or something had sent them. The commander knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had revealed its strength to the galaxy, and in doing so, had drawn the attention of something far older and darker than anyone understood. Late that night, as the ship floated silently in orbit, the commander stood by the viewing window. The stars seemed calm again, but the calm felt fragile. He whispered quietly, "We warned them. We didn't build this ship for war," but they never listened. A young technician beside him asked, "Do you think they'll forgive us?" The commander didn't look away from the stars. "Forgive us? No, but maybe they'll understand." Below them, Earth shone like a small blue flame against the endless dark. It looked peaceful, fragile, and full of life. And for the humans aboard Erebus, that was enough. The galaxy might see them as rebels, but they knew the truth. They hadn't built a warship to conquer. They built it so that no one could ever again decide their fate for them. Still, the Council's silence after the battle was unsettling. Days passed and no message came. No praise, no punishment, just silence. It felt like the galaxy was holding its breath. Then, on the 6th day, long-range sensors detected something. Not a fleet, not a ship, but a signal. It wasn't human. It wasn't from the Council. It came from deep space, far beyond any known border. It was a warning. The words were simple and cold. "You have awakened what should have remained buried." And with that, the transmission ended. Every member of the crew felt the same chill. They had survived the battle, but something far worse was coming. The Erebus wasn't just humanity's ship anymore. It had become the first line of defense for an entire galaxy that didn't even know what was waiting. Beyond its edge, and somewhere far away, something ancient had noticed them. For days after the strange signal, silence ruled the stars. The Erebus floated in the cold darkness above Earth, its hull scarred but still glowing faintly from the battle. Inside, the crew moved quietly, each person trying to pretend everything was normal. But it wasn't. The message had changed everything. "You have awakened what should have remained buried." Those words repeated in every mind, haunting them. No one could explain who sent it or what it meant. The engineers studied the strange wreckage from the battle again and again, searching for answers. What they found was terrifying. Some of the metal in those ships wasn't just ancient. It was impossible. It predated any known civilization. It was older than the Council itself. The scientists aboard Erebus came to one conclusion. The attackers weren't just raiders or rebels. They were something far older, something that had been sleeping beyond the edge of explored space, and the battle had woken them up. The crew didn't talk much about it, but everyone could feel the same fear. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council finally broke its silence. A transmission arrived, cold and official. The message began with the usual formal words thanking humanity for assistance in the previous engagement. But the tone quickly shifted. The Council demanded that Erebus be surrendered for inspection and dismantling. They claimed it was necessary for safety reasons. No one was surprised. They had saved the Enforcer fleet, but deep down everyone knew the Council would never truly accept a human-built warship. It wasn't about peace. It was about control. Earth's leaders refused. They sent a simple reply. The Erebus will remain under human command. We will not surrender what we built. That answer sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For the first time, humanity stood alone, without the Council's protection, without their approval. Some species quietly admired them for their courage. Others called them reckless. But the humans didn't care about politics anymore. They cared about survival. The strange energy readings near the edge of space began to grow stronger. Sensors picked up patterns, faint at first, then increasing daily. It was like something was moving closer, slowly but steadily. The commander of Erebus gathered the crew in the central briefing hall. Everyone stood silently as the lights dimmed and a holographic image appeared. It showed the galaxy, a glowing spiral of stars. Near its edge, a dark region pulsed faintly. That's the source of the signal, he said quietly, and it's moving toward inhabited space. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, someone asked, "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "We don't know, but we might be the only ones ready to face it." Those words settled heavily over everyone. They all knew what it meant. Humanity wasn't going to hide. They were going to confront whatever was coming. Days turned into weeks. The crew worked endlessly to repair the ship. Every scar from the last battle was fixed, every system recalibrated. The Erebus became stronger than before. Its engines tuned to perfection, its shields upgraded, its crew more united than ever. Outside, Earth watched in silence. Millions followed every transmission, every update. They knew this wasn't just a ship anymore. It was humanity's shield. Then one night, as the Erebus orbited the far side of the moon, it happened. The sensors screamed first. Then the lights dimmed. A strange wave of static filled the communications deck. The ship shuddered as if space itself had trembled. And then, out of the blackness, something emerged. At first, it looked like a shadow. Massive, shifting, alive. It wasn't a fleet. It was something else entirely. A structure, a ship? A living thing? No one could tell. Its size was beyond imagination. The sensors failed to measure it fully. It blotted out the stars. Every alarm on Erebus blared at once. "Contact confirmed," said one officer, her voice shaking. "It's not responding to hails. It's just watching us." The commander stood silently, staring at the dark shape on the screen. "All hands to battle stations," he said softly. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The Erebus moved forward cautiously. Every system was active. The ship's hull vibrated under the strain of full power. Then, without warning, the massive shape released a pulse of light. It wasn't a weapon, it was a scan. Within seconds, every console aboard Erebus flickered. The alien structure was studying them. "It's reading everything," whispered one technician. "Our systems, our design, even our shields." And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, a voice echoed across every frequency, deep, cold, and emotionless. "You build what you do not understand. You wake what you cannot control." The voice wasn't directed only at them. It was broadcasting across the entire galaxy. Every world, every station, every ship could hear it. Once the stars were silent. Then came your kind. You built, you spread, and you forgot the old warnings. Now we return. The transmission ended. The crew sat frozen. For a long time, no one moved. Finally, the commander turned to his crew. "If they're returning," he said, "then we make sure they don't get past us." The Erebus charged its weapons. The ship's power levels rose, its hull glowing faintly blue. The unknown entity began to move closer. Energy readings spiked beyond anything seen before. And then, the battle began. At first, the Erebus fired everything it had. Rail cannons thundered. Energy beams lit up the dark and missile trails streaked through the void. But the target didn't shatter. It absorbed the hits like the fire was feeding it. Shields holding at 70%. Someone shouted, "Keep firing!" The commander yelled back. The alien structure responded, releasing smaller shapes. Dark, fast-moving craft that looked like shards of glass. They sliced through space, surrounding Erebus from every side. The crew fought back with everything they had. The ship twisted, rolled, dodged, and struck with precision. Every explosion lit the void like fireworks, but the enemy kept coming. The shields dropped to half. Systems overloaded. The engines screamed. But still, no one gave up. "Route emergency power," the commander ordered. "We hold this line or Earth burns next." And somehow, against all odds, Erebus held. The alien shapes started breaking apart one by one. The crew found patterns in their movement, weaknesses in their formation. Humanity's adaptability, the one thing the galaxy had underestimated, became their greatest strength. Finally, with one last desperate strike, the Erebus released all remaining energy into its main cannon. A beam of pure light shot through the dark, tearing straight into the center of the alien structure. There was no sound in space, but the crew could feel the vibration through the ship's hull. The massive shadow cracked, splitting apart like stone under pressure, and then it was gone. The stars returned. The silence that followed was deafening. The crew looked around at each other, exhausted and stunned. Systems were failing, shields were almost gone, but they were alive. Earth was safe. When the message finally reached the Council, the galaxy reacted in disbelief. The humans had done the impossible again. The ship that was never meant to exist had saved not just its creators, but everyone. And this time the Council couldn't hide behind rules. Representatives from dozens of worlds sent messages of gratitude. Even the Enforcer Commander, once their greatest critic, sent a quiet salute. But humanity didn't ask for thanks. They knew this wasn't about power. It was about proving that they belonged among the stars. That they could protect not just themselves, but everyone. In the quiet aftermath, the Erebus drifted back toward Earth. Its hull was scarred, its systems damaged, but its spirit was unbroken. The people of Earth watched as the ship descended through the clouds, its engines glowing faintly in the dawn light. Children pointed up from the ground, watching the vessel that had defended their world. For the first time in history, humanity didn't feel small compared to the galaxy. They felt equal. As the Erebus landed and the crew stepped onto the ground, the commander looked up at the sky. The same stars that had once seemed so distant, so unreachable. He smiled quietly and said, "They told us we weren't allowed to build a warship. Maybe they were right. Because we didn't build a weapon, we built hope." And in that moment, everyone watching knew the truth. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever. Not by destroying, but by protecting. The Erebus stood as a symbol of courage, unity, and the unbreakable spirit of a species that refused to be silent. No matter what came next, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never again underestimate Earth.